Welcome to Digication Scholars Conversations. I'm your host, Jeff Yan. In this episode, you will hear part 2 of my conversation with Natalie McKnight from Boston University. More links and information about today's conversation can be found on Digication's Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Full episodes of Digication Scholars Conversations can be found on YouTube or your favorite podcast app.
You are about to hear part 2 of our conversation with Natalie McKnight from Boston University. Please be sure to listen to our previous episode to hear part 1 of this conversation.
But it's interesting what you were saying about how when we were in college, people weren't thinking this way. And I think you're right. I mean, I'm not going to date you, but I'll date myself. Probably already have by saying I've been 31 years at BU. But I was in college I was in college in the 80s, and it was very me-oriented generation, right? It really was about me, and me first, making money. And then the 90s were kind of like that too. And the stock market was taken off and things like that. And there's only like around 2000 we had the dot-com burst, and then we had 9/11, and so many aftershocks from that, emotional, social, political, and economic, of course. And I think that all the students we're teaching now, they were born after 9/11, or 2000 to 2001, something like that. I think that's part of the difference. And then global climate change has it's been talked about for decades, but it's really, really been talked about more in the last 10, 15 years. So they're growing up with all of that. They have a much more urgent sense of world crises than I think maybe I did in the 80s.
From a timing standpoint for global warming, I had thought a little bit about sort of the generation of folks that when it first got suggested, they technically really had time. They really felt like, hey, I'd be lucky if I lived until when it really can impact us, and I think that current generations really don't feel that way. If you are a 15-year-old right now, you are kind of it. You're the ones who has to deal with this, right? And so,
the buck stops there.
Yeah, you really have to. It becomes pretty real suddenly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't even. I've always believed in global climate change. I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, outside of Pittsburgh, so I saw terrible environmental stuff at the end of the 60s, early 70s, and then they cleaned it up. But I think this has been kind of front burner for me my whole life. So I was a very open audience to that. But in spite of that, I don't think I ever thought I would live to see as many demonstrable, really dramatic effects of climate change already. I mean, just look in the last few months. We're having very strange weather, and have been for the high, the highest highs, the lowest lows, the most rain. California's the worst fires. It's just one, what's the word I want? Excessive adjective after another to describe what we're seeing. I don't think I thought maybe by 2050 people would be seeing that, but nope, it's here.
Yep. Yeah, we all get impacted by it already, and it's definitely one of the contemporary issues that we have no time but to wait, and we have to deal with. So speaking of that, what are some of the other current issues, contemporary issues that you see as a dean in higher education? I want to talk about that because I think there's no secret that you and I are both fans of higher education and what it enables for students. But I also, talk to people sometimes that are not in the field of higher education or in education, right? And when they talk about their own children, this is usually the part where education comes to become, it matters to them, but they also are in the camp of, hold on a second, I've heard that college is not even necessary anymore. A, there's these boot camps you can do. B, is really expensive. Is it worth it? What about student loans? Should they just come out student loan right off the bat? Like how do you feel about all of this?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, excellent question. I'm just writing some notes so because I got like four ideas that came to me at once. Let's start with the
Mhm,
last point. The expense of college. That is one of the what's one of the crises I'm really concerned about.
mhm,
And I do think higher ed should be accessible to everyone, financially accessible to everyone. And I've been very glad that BU had a very successful capital campaign, which ended right before the pandemic. And now we are able to meet full financial need for any student who gets in.
that's
But
amazing.
of course, there's still a gap. Using our calculus for determining financial aid, we meet that. There's still gaps. People still need
Mhm,
financial
right.
help, and I'm trying to fill in some of those gaps myself. But I think we need to do more of that. While at the same time recognizing college isn't for everyone. I mean, I do think that it's a wonderful experience for most people, and I think it should be accessible to all people. But there are some people
Mhm,
who are would be happier and would be more suited to going to a place that's maybe not a 4-year degree program or more technological training, right? Because that's just what they love and that's what they're good at, and the
mhm,
higher ed thing is just not going to, the liberal arts education is not going to speak to them. So I think we need to have a better value system in terms of recognizing that too is a real
mhm,
thing and we
mhm,
need people in those areas, and there are definitely people who are going to be happier going into that, but we should make the other model available to everybody. So that's going to be a financial model that is going to take
yeah.
fundraising. It's going to take more government support. Again, everyone says, "Why did tuition go up so much?" You can diagram it. It's the simplest diagram in the world. Here is state funding for education over the last 20 years. And here's the
Mhm,
cost of tuition.
mhm,
Direct inverse
right.
proportion. Tuition has gone up not because they're paying people like me, bazillions. My salary's fine. I'm no complaints, but it's gone up in direct inverse proportion to the diminishment of government support, and that comes from this demonization of taxes. I mean, taxes aren't societies function on tax. You don't have taxes. You don't have a society, right? That's an issue that needs to be dealt with. I also think something I think about all the time. I was actually just in a virtual conference this morning giving a paper about this. Is the mental health issues, which were already
Mhm,
really increasing prior to the pandemic. So increases in anxiety, depression, addictive behaviors, suicide, etc. And and I don't think we have allocated enough resources, people, time to dealing with those
mhm,
issues,
yeah.
and those two came to a head in the pandemic. And one of the things, this will sound esoteric, but one of the things I was talking about today, because it was a Dickens conference I was at, was how Dickens always saw the fluid interconnections between the mind and the body. And you see it in again and again in descriptions. You've got a physical ailment, it creates mental problems. You've got mental problems, it creates physical ailments. It's not like in the West, we tend to split off mind body all the time, and we allocate resources to dealing with the physical
Mhm,
problems, and we don't to dealing not not enough to dealing with
mhm,
the mental issues. And then we also we create shame around having mental health. Like if I had
yeah.
appendicitis, everyone would say, "Oh, poor Natalie, she's appendicitis." If I was massively depressed, I think people would be sad for me too, but it might be more hush hush.
Mhm,
I might not even tell people. Right? I would tell people if I was in the
right.
hospital because I had to have my appendix out. Would I tell them I was in the hospital because I had suicide ideation? No, probably not. Right. So I know this is probably going pretty far afield, but we got a mental health crisis in higher ed with our students. We got it nationally. We have
I
it
think you're
globally.
absolutely correct. Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct, and I actually think that there is something interesting about going back to, remember I was saying, there. I mean, I've met a lot of parents who had said, why don't you just like take some of those free or like $100 for the whole year course and learn how to be a programmer and I don't know, go make money in Silicon Valley,
Yep.
right? Um, and I think in some sense, some aspects of those skills. I mean, I actually do question some of the skills that they get anyway, because we keep looking for those people, and or we keep having people apply for our positions
Yep.
with those kinds of training, and um, it doesn't mean that they're all bad, but the applicants that have been strong, um, from at least from what we can see, were not strong because of those programs. They were strong because they were good to begin with,
Right.
or they had
Hmm.
the mental toughness to go in and find answers for themselves.
Right.
But the it wasn't good enough. But having
Yep.
that said, the part that I actually miss the most is exactly what you were talking about. When you are now, if you are traditionally college aged, and even not traditional, college age person, um, going through college, there is a I do think that there is a certain amount of it's sort of like your brain doesn't really get fully developed when you're at 26. You
Right.
are you're kind of forming these things, both opinions, but also how to handle crisis, etc. Many people do have their crisis come up during these times,
Yes.
and things happen. People could
Yep.
pass away in your family. You could
Yep.
lose loved ones. You could experience things that you just or love. You might
Yep.
break up with
Fall in
someone,
love.
or
Yep.
and things like that. And this mental health part of the formula is incredibly important. And I think that, on one hand, we're saying that we don't fund it nearly enough. On the other hand, if you go to just say some boot camp somewhere, that's not even that's
Oh
not
no.
even the
Don't do nothing.
that's not even the checkbox they think about checking.
No.
You know,
No, it's true.
and
It's true.
I have had the privilege to look at sort of operating budgets for colleges and universities, a few times, and most, at least in most cases that I've ever experienced, um, no one is making out like bandits. It's not like there was someone who's like,
No.
you're
No.
charging all this money because of, and you're exactly correct,
With
is that the funding source have changed. Um,
if that's it. Yep.
and it
With the
always costs
possible
money.
exception of
Yeah,
insurance companies,
yeah,
health insurance
yeah.
companies,
It always
they've
costs.
gone up a lot.
It always costs
Yeah.
money, and in fact, I would say it has
Yep.
cost more now, because I used to be a trustee at a college, and I remember hearing passionately by a presentation by our, I think it was a director of health services or something. I forgot her title exactly, and she gave us this statistics that basically said, um, 5 years ago, the percentage of students coming in report self-identifying as having mental health problems that need help was 20%. And this is years ago, like this is
Yep.
probably 8 years ago. um, and but today, our student body coming in, over 50%
Over
needs
50%.
help,
Yeah.
easily over 50%. And
Yep.
it's because, part of it is because students are more early, they get diagnosed earlier because they're more
Yep.
knowledgeable. They can, when there's a problem, when they feel it, and when they're shameful, they look it up online and they go, oh,
Yep.
this is
It's true.
why, this is where I belong. And they're able to at least get the terminologies and
Right.
understand it, even when they're not willing to talk to people about it publicly. and
Yeah.
and so, I remember talking to this person, and she really just basically pleaded that, look, we literally need to double our staff in order to support them.
Yes.
There's no way around
Yes.
that. There is just no
Yep.
way around it. There's no shortcut. There's not an app that will take care of it for us. You they need the help, and that's what they need. And when you're in a college environment, you're, at least at a college like BU, typically the students are away from home. They're no longer under the guidance and supervision of their parents, and all of the possible support structure that they're used to having. The school becomes part of that for them.
Oh, huge. Yeah. In loco parentis, right?
Hmm.
It's us, and we don't have enough staff. And I know we've staffed up, but it's not enough. And of course, counseling, like teaching, is it takes time.
Hmm. Right.
It takes a lot of one-on-one.
Right.
You can't counsel a room of 100 people at the same time, you know?
Right.
There's no efficiency model
Yeah.
for counseling. So it is something we need to direct more attention to, and I think more research. And I do see some good trends in counseling, maybe moving a little bit away from pharmaceuticals and nothing. I mean, there are pharmaceuticals that are just tremendously helpful,
Hmm.
for depression, anxiety, etc. And
Sure. Hmm.
ADHD. I'm not poo-pooing that at all, but I also don't think that that is the only
Right.
answer. And I'm
Right.
kind of excited by cognitive behavior therapy, and more and
Hmm.
more people adopting that,
Yes.
and training people in the idea of trying to change the way you think and see
Yeah.
things. And this ties back to general education, because in our we require a philosophy course in the sophomore year. It's ethical
Hmm.
philosophy.
Yeah.
We talk about things like stoicism, and which is the roots of cognitive behavior therapy. And I think just talking about it, and talking about different theorists and philosophers and how they could be applied to current problems, it's the beginning of a toolkit that somebody could carry around with them,
Hmm.
so that when they're in a
Right.
crisis, they can say, "Where, what could I draw from this? Could I draw from this? What helps me most in
Yeah.
this moment?" And education, in many ways, is building up your internal toolkits for, well, how do I manage this situation? How do I hand this? And to your
Hmm.
point about the $100 training course, yeah, unless you come out of a course like that as somebody who's already great at communication skills and collaboration skills, and just very well balanced person, you're
Hmm.
not going to
Right.
bring a whole lot to a job, right? But
Hmm.
again, it's missing those training things are missing kind of the larger way in which an education ends up being not just a preparation for a job, although it's that too, but a preparation for life, for
Yeah.
building up those capacities of, like, discipline and thought, and and resources. I mean, when I think about the great resource literature has been to me, and what a refuge it's been to me in crises, including the pandemic. I was not one of those people who was watching a lot of TV in a pandemic, but I read, and I went back to some of my favorite books, and I just went into them, and it was this space, this safe space, this rich space, and not a problem-free space. Novels aren't based on problem-free situations, right? But they were somebody else's problems, and completely engrossing. And that's all part of an education, right? It's having those strategies for dealing with situations. It's having those collaboration skills. It's having um, those cultural resources that you can turn to kind of self-heal, music and art and literature. And I mean, I could go on all day to, I think I
Yeah.
owe my life to several books and some Bach concertos, and maybe Led Zeppelin.
I know that you are. If I remember correctly, you had told me one time. I think we might have been having lunch somewhere. That you told me that you are a musician. You play
I
piano.
am. I have piano and guitar. Yep.
Uh huh.
And I love it. And I did, some of that in COVID too. Not as much as I would have liked, but that too is a wonderful resource. If I can sit down with the piano or the guitar and just play. With piano, it's usually classical music, but not always. Sometimes just some of my favorite, maybe Tom Waits or Lou Reed songs or something. And ditto guitar. My husband and I, he plays banjo. He also plays guitar. We probably do hundreds of songs together. Again, it's such a great
That's
feeling.
awesome.
It's a great way to communicate with somebody. It's a great release. and you
Talk
come
about
away from
mental
it.
health.
Mental health. You go into it with whatever baggage you're bringing, and you play that music and you sing and you've created these sounds and the songs are taking you out of yourself, and when you come back to yourself, you're better than you were when you left.
That's
So
beautiful.
it's good. Do you play,
That's beautiful. I
Jeff?
think that that's
Are you a musician? Are you a musician?
I wish I keep picking up things that I try for a little while, but I always kind of run out of time, and then as soon as I am not able to sort of keep it as a practice, it's hard. But
It's hard.
I do appreciate the arts, in that
Yep.
way, and and I think that that's also one of those very long-term beneficial thing for humans, really, the
Yes.
ability to
Yep.
use the arts as a way to heal, to sort of look in, to use it as a lens to look at the world, to use it as a lens
Yes.
to look at yourself and examine what's happening in the world and what's happening
Hmm.
with you, processing your feelings and all that. I think it's a really um, important part that sometimes in very sort of skill focused disciplines where
Yes.
it's almost like, well, what is that going to do, right?
What's that? Oh, no, I hear it from students, but,
Yeah.
I completely agree with everything you're saying. I mean, I think it's, through the arts, there's a lot of things I would say, but, the arts do help teach you empathy. And I think empathy may be the only thing that can save the human race. We have to be able to feel for
Yeah.
people besides
Hmm.
ourselves. And,
Yeah.
and when you read or you watch a film and you are moved by somebody else, that's not you. Yeah, that's not you just feeling, selfish feelings. That is you feeling for another human being, and you are kind of building your empathy muscle. Or
Hmm.
if you're looking at a painting and you're moved by and you're intrigued by it, you're again, that's not a selfish thing. It's unless you're like a bazillionaire and you want to actually buy, you're going to buy that Picasso or you're going
Right.
to
Right.
buy that
Right.
Monet. But most of us are not in that position. You're looking at a painting, you're appreciating it in a non-selfish way. Iris Murdoch writes a lot about this. She's brilliant. That art is actually a wonderful ethical exercise because in appreciating it, you were doing something completely unselfish and appreciating something outside of yourself. And we all need to do that emotional gesture of appreciating things beyond ourselves, because if we're going to go out in the world and be successful human beings, we need to be able to do that habitually, is to be able to look at another person and see that as a human being as viable, as important as you yourself are, right? We don't naturally get there. We're animals, right? That rabbit in
Hmm.
my backyard eating my lettuces right now, it's not contemplating me as a human being. It's a very cute rabbit, but it's just wanting that lettuce in my backyard, and that's fine. I let the rabbits eat my lettuce. But I mean, you see what I mean? Is human beings need to be able to think more
Hmm.
than just about their own welfare, or uh,
Right.
we're sunk.
Well, so this leads to go to my final question, maybe final topic here,
Okay.
um, which which I feel like I want to ask you because I'm sure you see this a lot at BU and in college in general these days, on identity, on inclusivity, on equity. I mean, we are talking everything from gender, sexuality to race,
Hmm.
ethnicity, uh, ability, like you were saying before, is it
Hmm.
accessible to people, and how do we do that? And I think
Hmm.
you talked
Hmm.
already a bit about the ability to make it accessible by providing the funds, to do it, the
Hmm.
scholarships and
Hmm.
whatnot.
Hmm.
But for people who are in college today, for young people in college today, um, what is can you share some of what you see, like what do students
Hmm.
do and how do they identify themselves, how do they express themselves? Because I
Yep.
also think that there are people who might be listening also have this idea about what college looks like, frat houses and and sports, and those things don't not exist, but there's also a
They exist.
whole other sort of like side of college that doesn't look like the last Will Ferrell movie.
exactly.
So
No, that's yeah. No, it's such a great point. Such a great question. And yeah, and then of course, BU has sports and it's got frat houses, but not on campus. They have to be off campus. But I would say that, let's just take a look at the athletes for a second. I really sometimes hate the way college athletes get depicted, or even high school athletes in films, because it's like a monolith that they're all like,
mhm,
kind of mean and bullying, and then it's our athletes at BU. I mean, they've done wonderful work this year, as part of the Patriot League. So I was on the Patriot League Anti-Racist Commission this year, and it's like all the schools, and there's like 10 or 11 schools in the Patriot League, and it's all the athletic departments getting together and just trying to, like, running a whole lecture series, discussions, Black Lives Matter days where they'd wear warm-up shirts in their games and things like that talk about diversity and things. I see the athletic culture as being diverse even within itself, right? And very
mhm,
open
yep,
to these issues of inclusivity in ways that and uh, um, you know on inclusivity on all levels, as you named earlier. And then, but then, yes, you're right. That I'm just defending the athletes for a second because I just came off this Patriot Commission, but that is a small sector
mhm,
of BU, and
mhm,
there's so much diversity. And one of the things I think is most heartening to me, looking at the students now, we've talked about so many global crises, and it could all be depressing, but maybe we end on this note, is that the students are so much more evolved on these issues than many of the people who are teaching them, and they have much to teach us. And they're they are so sensitized by and large to inclusivity and wanting to be
mhm,
inclusive and being, you know, not just tolerant. Tolerant is, we would just dismiss that word. That suggests you got to put up with something, but embracing
mhm,
diversity in all ways. And that has grown, that characteristic, those qualities have grown so much of my over my 31 years at BU. I remember back in the early
mhm,
90s teaching a rhetoric class, and we were there was some pro con gay marriage essay pairing that we were reading, and like half the class
wow,
was for gay marriage and half was against it. I mean, that to me is like ancient
wow,
history. I can't believe how my students
mhm,
polled on that issue, whereas
mhm,
now I think probably for the
right,
last 15 years, if I'd polled a class, everybody'd say, well, what's the problem? Of course, gay, gay marriage is
right,
fine. I don't even understand why that's an issue. They couldn't even understand how it could be. So that's one issue that has really,
mhm,
really grown. And so I take real I derive a lot of hope looking at these students and their wisdom on these issues. And again, their embracing of inclusivity, not because it's trendy, but because it's right.
yeah, and I think that they've seen it, right?
Yeah,
Because there are many more people that they know. um, and I had this amazing conversation with a young person yesterday who said, um, we are actually not the minority, we just got minoritized. um,
yeah, right.
and but they are seeing, because people are more willing to express themselves and speak up.
Yeah,
They know people who are their friends, their families, themselves,
yes,
siblings,
yes,
who, it's no longer something that you just kind of go, well, that's not me. Like there's nothing
right,
wrong with that, but that's not me, right?
right,
it's
right,
it's it's nothing like that. That's the tolerant part of it. This is
right.
more like you
Exactly. That's
embrace that,
right.
you love it. um
Right. And right. And maybe, well, I guess embrace is an active verb, but to the point there that students, like, if they land in BU and it's diverse and they embrace that, that's kind of in some ways a bit passive. They seek it out.
yeah. Mhm,
They will push. They push BU, they push
mhm,
institutions, like, we are not diverse enough. We want more diverse students, we want more diverse faculty, we want more diverse staff. And as they should. The a university is supposed to be a microcosm of the universe, and that it really ought to be a microcosm of the
mhm,
universe. And BU's, I think, done done well along those lines. I think we have a way to go, but the students are in many ways leading the way, and that's encouraging.
Well, on that note, Natalie, thank you so much for sharing your wisdom. But I think we all agree that um, it is the student, like you said, that bring the game to all of us, right?
Yep.
And
Yep.
that's what's amazing. Like, and it really goes back to, I think, even some of the earlier thing that you said. You don't you let them do the undergraduate research work as a freshman, as a first year student,
Hmm.
because you don't
Hmm.
underestimate them. You don't think that you're not good
Hmm.
enough because you must learn these, some random, sort of
Hmm.
qualifier of you must have these basic skills before you can do this. No, we think of
Hmm.
them as, already, as they walk through the door, and even much younger, actually, positive contributors, to the world. And I think that's a really fabulous way to think about higher education as we move forward.
Absolutely. Jeff, this has been a lot of fun. This is a great conversation. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Natalie, and I hope to see you soon. Okay, and take
See
good
you
care.
soon.
Digication Scholars Conversations is brought to you by Digication, a technology platform powering the most innovative e-portfolio programs in K-12 and higher education. Our website can be found at digication.com. This episode was produced by Drew Albanesius. If you enjoyed today's conversation, please like, subscribe, and share with a friend. Thanks for watching.